The outcast among stars, when silence speaks louder than words. The transport ship descended through the crystal-clear atmosphere of Harmony Prime, and Marcus Chen pressed his face against the viewport to catch his first glimpse of the Nexus Academy. The sprawling campus stretched across rolling hills of silver grass, its buildings rising like organic growths from the peaceful landscape. Spires of living coral twisted toward the three suns, while streams of pure energy flowed between structures like rivers of light. It was beautiful beyond anything he had ever imagined, and it was about to become his prison. Marcus shouldered his simple Earth-made backpack and joined the line of new students waiting to disembark. Around him, beings from dozens of worlds chattered excitedly in the common galactic language. There were the ethereal Veilans with their translucent skin and musical voices, the towering hegemony representatives with their ceremonial robes, and the quicksilver Altarians whose empathic abilities let them share emotions directly. All of them fell silent when they noticed him. The whispers started immediately. Deathworlder. Savage species. Why would they let one of them into the academy? Marcus had expected this reaction. Earth's reputation preceded humanity wherever they went in the galaxy. His homeworld was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, a place so hostile that most species considered it uninhabitable. The fact that humans had not only survived but thrived there made other races deeply uncomfortable. They saw humans as barely controlled predators, violent and unpredictable. The Academy's greeting committee was led by Professor Thane, a Serenian whose pale blue skin seemed to glow with inner peace. The Serenians were known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and commitment to non-violence. They had not fought a war in over 2,000 years. "Welcome, students, to the Nexus Academy," Professor Thane said, his voice carrying easily across the landing platform. "Here, the brightest minds from across the galaxy come together to learn, to grow, and to build a future of peace and understanding." As the group moved toward the main campus, Marcus found himself walking alone. Other students gave him a wide berth as if violence might be contagious. He was used to this treatment, but it still stung. On Earth's Antarctic colonies where he had grown up, survival required cooperation. Everyone looked out for everyone else because the alternative was death. Here, among the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, he felt more isolated than he ever had in the frozen wastelands of home. The dormitory assignments were read aloud in the main hall. Marcus was placed in the Harmony Wing, supposedly a random assignment, but he noticed that his section was nearly empty compared to the others. They were giving other students space to avoid the dangerous human. His roommate was a crystalline being named Zephyr Kane from the Zerian system. Zephyr's body was composed of living crystal that changed color based on his thoughts, currently a nervous orange-yellow. When Marcus entered their shared room, Zephyr was arranging his belongings with precise mathematical efficiency. "I requested a single room," Zephyr said without looking up, his crystal body flickering between orange and red. "They said accommodations were full." "I can sleep in the common area if it would make you more comfortable," Marcus offered quietly. Zephyr paused in his organizing and looked at Marcus for the first time. The human was not what he had expected. There were no visible weapons, no scars, no signs of the savagery his species was known for. Just a young man with dark hair, steady brown eyes, and an expression of patient resignation. "You are smaller than I expected," Zephyr said, his crystal form shifting to a curious blue-green. "Most humans are. We are not actually giants who eat our enemies." Marcus set his backpack on the unused bed, "though I understand why you might think that from the stories." That evening, Marcus sat alone in the dining hall while hundreds of other students gathered in animated groups around him. The food was excellent, specially prepared to accommodate the dietary needs of dozens of different species, but he barely tasted it. He was studying the layout of the dining hall, noting the exits, the sight lines, the places where someone could hide. It was a habit drilled into him from childhood on a world where a moment's inattention could mean death. 3 tables away, Lyra Voss watched him with growing curiosity. As an Altarian, she could sense the emotional states of those around her, and what she felt from the human confused her. She had expected rage, barely controlled aggression, the violent emotions her people associated with Deathworld species. Instead, she sensed something entirely different, a deep, steady calm and an overwhelming desire to protect. "He does not feel dangerous," she said to her tablemates, her silver hair shimmering as she tilted her head. Of course he feels dangerous, replied Koros, a hegemony student whose multiple eyes all focused on Marcus. Humans destroyed 3 Korthak raiding fleets last year. They are killers by nature. No, Lyra said softly. He feels protective, like a guardian watching over sleeping children. The first weeks passed slowly for Marcus. In classes, he excelled at tactical studies and survival sciences while struggling with subjects that required cooperation with other students. Not because he was unwilling to work with others, but because others were unwilling to work with him. Group projects became individual efforts. Study groups excluded him without explanation. Even professors seemed nervous when he asked questions. The only exception was Professor Thane's philosophy of peace class. The elderly Serenian seemed genuinely interested in Marcus's perspective on conflict resolution. On your world, Professor Thane asked during one session, how do your people resolve disputes without violence? Marcus considered the question carefully. We try to prevent disputes from becoming violent by addressing their root causes early, but when violence cannot be avoided, we end it as quickly and decisively as possible. A short, controlled fight prevents a long, destructive war. The other students shifted uncomfortably. This was exactly the kind of thinking they expected from a Deathworlder. But surely, pressed Valania, an ethereal Valan student, there must be a way to resolve all conflicts through understanding and compromise? Not always, Marcus said quietly. Some beings choose violence regardless of what you offer them. When someone is trying to hurt innocent people, sometimes the most peaceful thing you can do is stop them permanently. The classroom fell silent. Professor Thane made a note on his datapad, but his expression remained thoughtful rather than disapproving. After class, Marcus was walking across the main courtyard when he noticed something that made him stop. The Academy's security sensors were all focused outward, designed to detect approaching threats from space or air. But there were blind spots in the coverage, places where someone could approach the buildings without being detected if they knew what to look for. More concerning was the energy flow he had observed in the building systems. The Academy's power grid was centralized, running through nodes that would be easy to sabotage. The emergency systems were sophisticated but predictable. Someone with the right knowledge could cripple the Academy's defenses in minutes. Marcus spent the next several days quietly studying the Academy's layout and security measures. He told himself it was just habit, the kind of environmental awareness that had kept him alive on Earth. But deep down, he knew he was preparing for something. His instincts, honed by a lifetime on a Deathworld, were screaming warnings that everyone else seemed deaf to. The Academy's annual diplomatic celebration was approaching, an event where students from different worlds would demonstrate their species' cultural achievements. Marcus had not planned to participate. He had nothing to celebrate and no one to share it with, but as the date approached, his unease grew stronger. 3 days before the celebration, Zephyr found Marcus sitting by their window, staring out at the Academy grounds in the darkness. You do not sleep much, Zephyr observed, his crystal body a dim blue in the moonlight. Sleep is a luxury on Deathworlds, Marcus replied. You stay alert or you die. But this is not a Deathworld. This is Harmony Prime, the most peaceful planet in the galaxy. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I know, but something feels wrong. Have you noticed how quiet the night sounds have become? 3 days ago, the singing trees were active until dawn. Now they go silent after midnight. Zephyr listened. He had not noticed, but now that Marcus mentioned it, the absence of sound was obvious. What does that mean? It means something is making them nervous, something that does not belong here. The next morning, Marcus approached Professor Thane after class. I would like to review the Academy's emergency procedures, he said. Professor Thane looked surprised. Is there a particular concern you have, Marcus? I have noticed some irregularities in the local wildlife patterns. I think it would be wise to ensure everyone knows what to do if there is a problem. What kind of problem could there be? This is a peaceful academic institution on a protected world. Marcus met the professor's eyes. The kind of problem that specifically targets peaceful academic institutions on protected worlds. That evening, Marcus found Lyra sitting alone in the library, surrounded by texts on interspecies empathy. She looked up as he approached, her silver eyes reflecting the soft light. You have been different lately, she said. More focused. What do you sense that we cannot? Marcus sat down across from her, choosing his words carefully. On my world, we have predators that hunt in patterns. They study their prey for days or weeks before attacking. They learn the routines, find the weaknesses, choose the perfect moment to strike. You think something is hunting us? I think something has been studying this academy for a long time, and the diplomatic celebration would be the perfect time for it to act. Maximum targets, minimum security, everyone gathered in one place. Lyra's empathic senses reached out toward Marcus, and what she felt there made her breath catch. Beneath his calm exterior was a predator's awareness, a hunter's instinct that recognized another hunter. But there was something else, a fierce, protective love for every innocent life in the academy, including beings who had treated him with fear and suspicion. "What should we do?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Hope that I am wrong, but if I am right, stay close to the exits during the celebration. And if something happens, do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you, without question or hesitation." As the night deepened around them, neither student noticed the shadow that detached itself from the darkness outside the library window. Something had indeed been studying the academy, and it had just learned that there was one student who might pose a problem to its plans. The hunt was about to begin. When death comes calling, the predator meets his match. The diplomatic celebration transformed the academy's main auditorium into a showcase of galactic cultures. Crystalline sculptures from Xerion cast rainbow patterns on the walls, while Altarian empathy gardens filled the air with emotions of joy and wonder. Valen musicians performed on instruments made of solid sound, their melodies weaving through the crowd like living things. Nearly 1,000 students, faculty, and visiting dignitaries filled the vast space, all celebrating the diversity and achievements of peaceful civilization. Marcus stood near the rear exit, his position carefully chosen to observe both the stage and the main entrances. He had tried to convince several friends to stay near the exits as well, but only Lyra had taken his warning seriously. She stood with a group of Altarian students about 30 meters away, her silver eyes occasionally finding his across the crowded room. Zephyr was on stage, his crystalline form shifting through spectacular color patterns as he demonstrated Xerian mathematical harmonics. The display was beautiful and peaceful, exactly what the Academy celebrated. But Marcus was not watching the performance. His attention was focused on the small inconsistencies that had been bothering him for days. The maintenance worker who had been servicing the air circulation system was not on the Academy's staff roster. The security guard who had been asking detailed questions about the celebration's timing was wearing a uniform that was slightly wrong shade of blue. The diplomatic transport that had arrived that morning had transmitted the correct authorization codes, but its energy signature did not match any known peaceful species technology. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest that came when a hunt was about to begin. On Earth, this feeling had saved his life dozens of times. Here, surrounded by beings who had never known real danger, he hoped desperately that he was wrong. The lights dimmed as the celebration moved to its final performance, a unity ceremony where representatives from each world would join their voices in a song of galactic peace. As the first notes rang out across the auditorium, Marcus saw movement in the shadows near the main stage. A figure emerged from the darkness, moving with liquid grace that spoke of perfect muscular control. It was tall and lean, covered in matte black armor that seemed to absorb light. Its face was hidden behind a featureless mask, but Marcus could see the predator's stillness in the way it held its body. This was a hunter, an apex predator, and it was exactly where it wanted to be. The creature raised its hand, and Marcus saw the shimmer of an energy weapon powering up. In seconds, it would begin killing the most promising young minds in the galaxy, starting with those on the stage. Marcus moved. He did not shout a warning or call for help. There was no time, and panic would only make things worse. Instead, he flowed through the crowd like water, his path calculated to put him between the assassin and its targets. Every step was deliberate, every movement designed to avoid causing alarm until the last possible moment. The assassin's weapon discharged with a sound like thunder. The energy beam lanced across the auditorium and struck the spot where Zephyr had been standing a heartbeat before. But Zephyr was no longer there because Marcus had reached the stage controls and killed the lights, plunging the auditorium into darkness just as the shot was fired. Emergency lighting activated immediately, casting everything in a red glow, but it was enough. The audience finally understood that something was wrong. Screams echoed through the vast space as 1,000 beings tried to reach the exits at once. The assassin turned toward Marcus, its masked head tilting with what might have been curiosity. It had expected chaos and panic, easy targets fleeing in terror. It had not expected organized resistance from a student. Marcus spoke into his personal communicator, his voice carrying clearly despite the surrounding chaos. All students move to exits in groups of 10. Faculty, implement emergency containment protocols. Security, the threat is a single individual with advanced energy weapons and stealth capabilities. But even as he spoke, Marcus knew that Academy security would be useless against this threat. They were trained to handle student disputes and equipment malfunctions, not military-grade assassins. The guards who came running into the auditorium lasted less than 10 seconds before the assassin cut them down with casual efficiency. Now the creature's attention was fully focused on Marcus. It raised its weapon again, but Marcus was already moving, using the panicking crowd as cover. The assassin fired repeatedly, each shot precisely aimed, but Marcus seemed to flow around the energy beams like smoke. On Earth, Marcus had grown up hunting frost stalkers, predators that could move faster than human eyes could follow. He had learned to track them not by sight but by understanding their thinking patterns, their preferred attack vectors, their instinctive responses to prey behavior. This assassin was deadlier than any Earth predator, but it still thought like a hunter. Marcus reached Lyra's position just as the assassin fired again. He pulled her behind a fallen display case as the energy beam scorched the air where she had been standing. "What is that thing?" she gasped, her empathic senses overwhelmed by the creature's alien thought patterns. "Professional killer," Marcus replied, checking his surroundings. "Military-grade equipment, extensive training, probably sent here specifically to eliminate the Academy's most promising students. Can the security forces stop it?" Marcus looked toward the main entrance where Academy guards were setting up a perimeter. The assassin noticed them too and fired a single shot. The energy beam passed through their defensive barrier like it was made of paper, and 3 guards fell instantly. "No," Marcus said simply. "They cannot." The assassin began moving through the auditorium systematically, hunting students who had not reached the exits fast enough. Its movements were fluid and efficient, like a predator that had done this many times before. But something was bothering it. The human student was not behaving like prey. Most beings, when faced with a superior predator, either fled in panic or froze in terror. But this human was doing neither. He was studying the assassin's patterns, learning its capabilities, looking for weaknesses. More disturbing, he was actively interfering with the hunt, pulling potential targets out of the line of fire, creating obstacles and distractions. The assassin paused in its systematic killing to focus on this anomaly. It had been briefed about human capabilities, but the reports had described them as savage and crude, dangerous only because of their willingness to use violence. This human was something else entirely. This human was thinking. Marcus saw the shift in the assassin's behavior and knew he had its full attention now. He stepped out from behind cover, making himself a clear target. "Lyra, when I move, get everyone out through the rear exits. Do not look back, do not try to help. Just get them to safety." "Marcus, no. You cannot fight that thing alone." "I am not going to fight it," Marcus said, his voice utterly calm. "I am going to hunt it." The assassin raised its weapon, but Marcus was already moving, not running away like prey, but advancing like another predator. The energy beam missed by inches as Marcus rolled behind an overturned table, came up running, and dove behind a stage platform. For the first time since entering the auditorium, the assassin felt something it had not experienced in years: uncertainty. This was not how prey was supposed to behave. Marcus appeared from behind the platform, now carrying something he had taken from the Academy's demonstration materials. It was a Xerion crystal resonator, normally used for harmonic mathematics, but Marcus had reconfigured it into something else entirely. He threw the device at the assassin's feet. When it struck the floor, it exploded into a burst of crystalline fragments moving at hypersonic speeds. The assassin's armor protected it from serious injury, but the unexpected attack forced it to take a step back. Marcus used that moment to reach the auditorium's control systems. His fingers flew over the panels, his Earth-trained mind adapting to alien technology with startling speed. The Academy's environmental systems were designed for peace and comfort, but in the hands of someone who understood survival, they became weapons. The auditorium's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, making it difficult for the assassin to maintain its balance. The atmospheric processors began flooding the room with thick, obscuring mist. The acoustic dampeners engaged, muffling sound and making it harder to track movement by audio. Within seconds, the orderly execution ground had become a chaotic battlefield that favored neither predator. But Marcus had one advantage the assassin lacked. He knew this terrain. The assassin fired blindly into the mist, trying to flush out its elusive prey. But Marcus was no longer where the shots were aimed. He had used the Academy's ventilation system to move to an entirely different section of the auditorium, and now he was behind the assassin. The attack came from above. Marcus dropped from the ceiling access panel like a falling stone, carrying a piece of debris from one of the destroyed displays. The improvised weapon struck the assassin's helmet with enough force to crack the advanced armor. For the first time, Marcus saw his enemy's face. It was humanoid but clearly alien, with pale gray skin, no visible nose, and eyes like black glass. This was a Korthak, one of the galaxy's most feared assassin species. They were bred for killing, trained from birth in every form of combat, equipped with the most advanced weapons available. But as the Korthak looked up at the human who had just cracked its supposedly impenetrable helmet, Marcus saw something in those black eyes that he recognized: respect. This was no longer an execution. This was a duel between apex predators. The real fight was about to begin. The Guardian awakens. Why humans are the galaxy's greatest protectors. The mist swirled around the two combatants as they faced each other in the ruined auditorium. The Korthak assassin called Vrak the Destroyer had killed thousands across the galaxy, earning a reputation that made entire star systems flee at the mention of his name. He had expected this mission to be routine: eliminate the most promising students at the Academy, cripple the next generation of galactic leadership, and escape before any meaningful resistance could be organized. But the human standing before him had changed everything. This was no terrified student or helpless academic. This was something Vrak had never encountered before: a Deathworld apex predator operating at full capacity. Marcus wiped a trickle of blood from his forehead where debris had cut him during his aerial assault. His breath came steady and controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Every muscle was relaxed but ready, every sense tuned to maximum awareness. This was what humans were designed for: protecting their pack against impossible odds. Vrak drew a curved blade from his armor, its edge glowing with molecular disruption technology. The weapon could cut through virtually any known material, including human bone and flesh. He had used it to kill 3 Academy security chiefs in the past hour alone. Marcus picked up a piece of broken crystalline sculpture, testing its weight and balance. It was not much of a weapon against military-grade equipment, but he had learned long ago that the deadliest weapon was the mind that wielded it. They circled each other slowly, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Around them, the last few students were finally reaching the exits, guided by Lyra and other survivors who had heard Marcus's instructions. Soon they would be alone. "You fight well for prey," Vrak said, his voice distorted by the damaged helmet. "But you only delay the inevitable. I am Korthak. I am bred for war." "And I am human," Marcus replied quietly. "I am bred for survival." Vrak lunged forward with inhuman speed, his blade cutting through the air where Marcus's head had been a split second before. But Marcus was no longer there. He had dropped low and rolled left, coming up inside Vrak's guard. The crystalline fragment in his hand struck the assassin's wrist joint with surgical precision, disrupting the armor's power flow and causing the molecular disruptor to flicker. Vrak spun and backhanded Marcus with enough force to send him flying across the auditorium. Any normal being would have been killed instantly by the blow, but humans were anything but normal. Marcus hit the wall hard, rolled with the impact, and came up running. The assassin pursued him relentlessly, moving with the fluid grace of a perfect killing machine. But as the chase continued, something strange began to happen. Vrak found himself being led through the auditorium in a specific pattern, always arriving a step behind his target, always striking empty air. Marcus was not running randomly. He was using the Academy's layout against his opponent, forcing Vrak to move through choke points and obstacles that favored human agility over Korthak's strength. Every twist and turn of the pursuit served a purpose in a plan that was forming as Marcus adapted to his enemy's capabilities. Near the main stage, Marcus suddenly stopped and turned to face his pursuer. Vrak smiled behind his damaged helmet, thinking his prey had finally been cornered. He raised his weapon for a killing strike. That was when Marcus activated the Academy's emergency lockdown system. Blast shields slammed down over every exit. Force fields activated throughout the building. The Academy's AI began implementing protocols designed to contain hazardous materials or dangerous experiments. In seconds, the entire facility became a sealed fortress, but Marcus was not trying to trap Vrak inside with the students. He was trapping himself inside with Vrak. "You have made a mistake, human," Vrak snarled. "Now you cannot escape when I kill you." "I was never trying to escape," Marcus said. I was making sure you could not escape when I killed you. The psychological impact of those words hit Vrak harder than any physical blow. For the first time in his professional career, he was facing prey that considered itself the predator. Marcus began moving again, but now his behavior had changed completely. He was no longer evading or defending. He was stalking. Every step was calculated to force Vrak into specific positions, every movement designed to limit the assassin's options and control the battlefield. The Academy's systems had become Marcus's weapons. He used the environmental controls to create temperature differentials that fogged Vrak's enhanced vision. He triggered the fire suppression system to flood sections of the auditorium with dense foam that clung to the assassin's armor and slowed his movements. He activated the building's gravitational stabilizers in alternating patterns that kept Vrak off balance, while Marcus, accustomed to Earth's heavy and variable gravity, moved with unchanged efficiency. Vrak began to understand what was happening. The human was not fighting him with superior strength or better weapons. The human was outthinking him. Every trap, every trick, every tactical decision demonstrated a level of strategic intelligence that Vrak had never encountered. This was not just survival instinct, this was apex predator problem-solving applied to warfare. The turning point came when Marcus led Vrak into the Academy's physics laboratory. Shelves lined with experimental equipment and energy sources offered new possibilities for someone creative enough to see them. Marcus grabbed a gravitic containment unit and hurled it at an experimental fusion cell, creating a chain reaction that filled the room with crackling energy discharges. Vrak's armor, designed to deflect direct energy weapons, was not prepared for the chaotic multi-directional electrical storm that suddenly engulfed him. His systems began to fail, his weapons lost power, and his enhanced senses were overwhelmed by electromagnetic interference. Marcus struck in that moment of vulnerability. He did not use another improvised weapon or environmental trap. Instead, he used the most dangerous weapon in his arsenal, his understanding of anatomy and pressure points. His fingers found the nerve cluster at the base of Vrak's skull, applying pressure with surgical precision. The assassin's enhanced reflexes meant nothing when his nervous system was being directly compromised. Vrak collapsed, paralyzed but alive. As the electrical storm subsided, Marcus stood over his defeated opponent, breathing heavily but victorious. Around them, the Academy's emergency systems were finally shutting down as the threat was neutralized. "How?" Vrak whispered through his damaged helmet. "I am the perfect killer. I have trained for this my entire life." Marcus looked down at the assassin with something that might have been pity. "That is why you lost. You trained to be a killer. I was raised to be a protector. When you hunt to kill, you only need to be strong enough. When you fight to protect, you need to be smart enough, creative enough, and determined enough to win against any odds." The lockdown systems disengaged as Professor Thane and a team of actual military security forces arrived at the Academy. They found Marcus sitting calmly beside the unconscious assassin, applying first aid to his own injuries while ensuring that Vrak continued breathing. "Marcus," Professor Thane said in amazement, "what you did tonight, how did you know?" "On Deathworlds, you learn to recognize predators," Marcus replied simply. "But more importantly, you learn that the most dangerous predators are the ones that hunt in packs, protect their young, and never give up when something they love is threatened." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the threat. Vrak the Destroyer had been hired by a criminal syndicate seeking to destabilize the Galactic government by eliminating the next generation of leaders. The Academy had been targeted specifically because it represented hope and peaceful cooperation between species. But more importantly, the investigation revealed something about humans that changed how the galaxy viewed them forever. Lyra found Marcus in the medical bay the next morning, where he was being treated for injuries that would have killed most other species. She sat beside his bed, her silver eyes reflecting deep thoughtfulness. "I felt what you were feeling during the fight," she said quietly. "You were not angry, you were not afraid, you were not excited by the violence." Marcus nodded slowly. "Protecting people is not about enjoying the fight, it is about being willing to do whatever is necessary to keep them safe." "The other students have been talking. They understand now why your species is called Deathworlders. But they also understand something else." "What is that?" "They understand why the galaxy needs Deathworlders." Word of the incident spread throughout civilized space with remarkable speed. The story of the human student who had single-handedly defeated one of the galaxy's most feared assassins became legend, but the real impact was deeper than simple admiration for combat prowess. Species throughout the galaxy began to reconsider their assumptions about humans and Deathworld species in general. They realized that the violence and aggression they feared were not signs of primitive savagery but evidence of the most sophisticated survival mechanisms in known space. A month later, Marcus stood before the Galactic Council, no longer a lonely exchange student but a representative of humanity's potential role in galactic civilization. "We do not ask to be feared," he told the assembled delegates. "We ask to be understood. Humans are dangerous, yes, but we are dangerous in the service of protection, not conquest. We are willing to face any threat, fight any battle, make any sacrifice to defend those who cannot defend themselves." The Council voted unanimously to expand the human exchange program and to request human advisors for planetary security throughout peaceful space. But more than that, they voted to change how they thought about strength and protection. Zephyr, whose crystal body now showed warm golden hues whenever he saw Marcus, had perhaps the best summary of what had changed. "We spent so long trying to eliminate all traces of violence from our society that we forgot how to protect ourselves from those who had not learned the same lesson. Marcus showed us that true peace is not the absence of the capacity for violence. True peace is having that capacity but choosing to use it only to protect the innocent." Marcus returned to his studies at the academy, but now he was no longer alone. Students who had once feared him sought him out as a teacher and protector. He established the first Galactic Defense Academy, teaching peaceful species how to recognize threats and respond effectively without losing their essential nature. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy understood the relationship between strength and wisdom. They learned that the most dangerous beings were not necessarily the most violent, but the ones who understood when violence was necessary and had the wisdom to use it sparingly. Years later, when historians wrote about the transformation of galactic civilization, they would mark the night of the Academy attack as the turning point. It was the night when the galaxy learned that its greatest protectors were not the species that had never known violence, but the species that had mastered it so completely that they could choose peace from a position of strength. Marcus Chen became the first human to graduate with highest honors from the Nexus Academy. But more than that, he became a bridge between two ways of thinking about safety and protection. He showed the galaxy that Deathworld survivors were not monsters to be feared, but guardians to be grateful for. The Academy's new motto, carved in crystal above the main entrance, read, "True peace is not the absence of warriors, but warriors who choose not to fight unless they must." On graduation day, as Marcus stood with his fellow students under the three suns of Harmony Prime, he received a message from Earth. His younger sister had been accepted into the expanded exchange program, along with 100 other humans who would serve as protectors and teachers throughout peaceful space. The galaxy had learned to embrace its guardians, and the guardians had learned that their greatest strength was not their ability to destroy, but their willingness to preserve. Vrak the Destroyer, serving a life sentence in a rehabilitation facility, would later write in his memoir, "I came to kill children and was defeated by someone who understood that protecting life requires a deeper kind of strength than taking it. The human did not beat me with superior violence, he beat me with superior purpose." The silent guardian had spoken, and the galaxy had listened. The end.